Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced is a better version of the original. It obviously looks much better and is now easily one of the best looking games of the year, especially when things like weather effects, lighting and wind all come together, or when you're just exploring a beach or dense forest. But Resynced is so much more than a graphical upgrade. It adds more meat to the already good bones by giving similar activities more personality, empty islands have a bit more life, and there's overall more narrative content that sadly is not on the same level as the main quest, but still delivers cool moments that make this a more complete package. Ubisoft struck gold with this new resynced formula in a time where they desperately needed a win, so I think this will be the start of more of these remakes, and I'm here for it, although I hope they do expand on this concept even more in future iterations. It's really cool how Ubisoft looked at the full story of Black Flag for this remake and was like, okay, what section could use an extra scene to make it all feel a bit more cohesive? No spoilers of course, but expect for example way more flashback scenes with his wife Caroline to focus a bit more on how he left things behind to chase fame and fortune. But also expect a few new gameplay scenes added to main story missions. I also like how every warehouse you encounter now has its own little story that explains why keys are in different locations. While in the original it was of course always just one soldier carrying it. The hideout now has much more personality as well, thanks to a butler you encounter and many more people you bring to this place over the course of the game, making it feel much more like a safe haven in this otherwise hostile world. But the biggest thing they did that will be less noticeable is remove a lot of the friction points that the original had. Of course, having no loading screens when docking at cities is amazing, but Black Flag Resynced is way more seamless because they completely removed any and all game over screens. You might remember that the original had many tailing missions that you had to completely redo if you were spotted, meaning you had to listen to the same conversation many times if you weren't careful. In Black Flag Resynced, it feels like there are almost no tailing missions. Don't get me wrong, they are still there, but any negative feelings associated with them are completely gone. You can still follow these characters, but you can also interrupt them, take them out and get the information that way. I don't recommend doing this throughout the whole game, but it's nice to have the option. The original also had a couple of stealth only sections where if you got spotted you had to repeat them, which is also gone in Resynced. Again, they removed everything that would stop you from moving forward. Although I do think it made some of these sections more memorable because it forced you to adapt a playstyle that you might not have used otherwise. So removing any and all game over screens does feel like taking things a bit too far. But the biggest change is certainly the moment-to-moment gameplay that even if you have already been through the original once, will make this feel like a much different experience. You probably know about all the new stealth options that open up with a new dedicated crouch button, but also getting the rope dart in sequence 3 instead of 11 and having it as a spammable ability gives you a lot of new options to toy with your enemies. But I do think for a future remake that Ubisoft should also improve the enemy AI for stealth to challenge us a bit more. Sure, the enemies were also stupid in the original, but you notice it a bit less because we as Edward were also more limited. Having way more options to approach stealth now really shows how lacking their awareness is and how poor their response is when their friends are killed. It's never scary to infiltrate a restricted area because your opponents don't really pose a threat. I think bringing the servant feature over from Shadows would have added some extra tension, so then workers would alert guards if they saw you kill someone. Now they don't do anything. So stealth basically still feels very basic. It's up to modern standards, sure, but I hope future remakes go beyond that. And the same can be said for combat, which, don't get me wrong, is a huge step up from the original, although I don't think everyone will agree. I love this hitbox based system that they introduced with Origins, where you can hit multiple enemies with your sword slashes and just more freely react to enemy attacks or counter them in multiple ways. And Resynced has a ton of that. I love how every ability and move brings something unique to the table and can be combined in really cool ways, with enemies reacting to our moves as well, so you are forced to use a different tactic, which is very clever and I hope we see more of in future games. My biggest problem, however, is that once you figure out how to counter each enemy, which you can already do super early in the game, then you can just rinse and repeat those tactics throughout your 50-hour journey. Even the brand new demolitionist enemy can instantly be taken out with a pistol shot, Like, it would have been cool if variants of these enemies in the later game maybe had some bulletproof armor or something, so you had to rethink your approach. I also put the game on hard and even used the beginning swords throughout most of my journey, but I was rarely challenged, which sadly makes all the added perks on legendary weapons lack any impact because the game is already way too easy. I think the progression Black Flag has for the naval combat should be applied to the ground combat in these Assassin's Creed games as well. Like, I've never been a huge naval fan, but what they did with Resynced made me a believer. Instead of completely reworking it, they basically expanded on what was already there, giving you very fun new firepower and just way more ways to engage with your enemies. And like I said, the progression is amazing. Ships that first scare you will be destroyed in seconds once you spend the necessary time upgrading your jackdaw. And it's super satisfying to test a new or improved weapon for the first time and see the impact it has on the enemy ships. Because you now get all the tools very early in the game, Edward will feel the same in combat throughout the whole journey, while your ship will go through a massive transformation, and it's very cool to see that unfold. I still think that Resynced is a better experience for people that did not play the original yet, simply because then this amazing story, which still easily holds up, is full of surprises. But I would argue that playing this game as a fan of the original is also very special, not only to see the small additions Ubisoft added here and there, but also because you can then go on brand new adventures with Edward, which if anyone had told you a few years ago, yo, there will be new missions with Edward in 2026, you would have called them crazy. And these are pretty good side missions with some intriguing scenarios, and having a full extra arc at the end of the game with some extra set pieces is pretty cool too. My only issue is that Edward just does not feel the same for me. He feels like an impersonator in these missions. He's way softer and less charming. One thing I noticed is that all the dialogue in these new quests is focused on the objective. We got to do this, and then we get this. What makes the main story of Black Flag so great is that there is a lot of nonsense too, with characters bantering, making fun of each other, like just being stupid and reacting to the events that happen in their own unique way. Like, don't get me wrong, these new quests are still very fun to play through. The new lieutenants have some cool backstories and their performances are pretty great. It was just blatantly clear to me that it was a different writing team taking their swing at Edward, and that did not land for me, sadly. So that's the only thing that dampens my excitement a bit for this new era that we're going into, because you can bet that Black Flag Resynced will be the start of many more of these remakes. Like, I forgot how it felt to have a Ubisoft release that everyone is celebrating and excited about, and Ubisoft Singapore really delivered on the promise of this remake, especially given the amount of time they were given, which will likely make Black Flag Resynced a very profitable venture for them. So I hope this means that they don't hold back with the next one, actually expand on the weapons we can use instead of removing things like hidden blade combat or the ability to pick up weapons from enemies, both of which would have made the combat even more enjoyable and definitely more varied. I also hope that future Assassin's Creed games finally launch with way more finishers again, because seeing the same handful of animations over and over throughout this long journey is just not good enough anymore, especially because the original had so many cool moves. And I also think having a bit more time to polish things would have helped. I totally had moments where enemy AI wasn't working, or where I could not continue because the enemies would not spawn in a fort, so I had to reload. My experience certainly got better with the day one update, but there were still quite some issues. If you have any questions, drop them down below and I will do my best to answer them. Subscribe, leave a like. I will of course have way more Black Flag Resynced videos on the channel and coming your way. Oh man, I cannot wait for Origins Resynced and Odyssey Resynced. It will still take some time, but they will happen in the next 5 years, 10 years for sure. I think we might get Odyssey Resynced before Origins. I digress. I will speak to you soon. Goodbye.